is going on, everybody? It is good to be back with the Fully Inflated Football video podcast. We have an exciting Week 7 of NFL football to react to, and then a big old bag of mail from the Patreon mailbag to get into, so it's going to be a great show. I'm really excited for it. That is a great reminder, though, that this show is brought to you by my Patreon. That is patreon.com/ThatFranchiseGuy, where you will get three things. Number one, you can support the show. It is the number one way to support my podcast and my channel. It's patreon.com/ThatFranchiseGuy. Thank you in advance, and thank you, most importantly, to my existing patrons. I really can't say enough about how far your support goes and how much it means towards me being able to do what I do here on YouTube and through this podcast. Secondly, though, you will get exclusive TFG videos. I'm going to be working up my Week 8 picks video on Patreon tomorrow. I'm trying to get to a film room on Patreon. Been so busy these days, I haven't been able to get there, but I'm working up to it. And then third, you will get exclusive access to the mailbag for the show, where we will answer your questions. You can guarantee that I read your questions and answer it here on the show. Just $1 a month on Patreon, you get access to those DMs where you can send in your Patreon mailbag questions. All right, that is out of the way. Let's start talking some football. And we're going to start with the Steelers-Titans game that, pun intended, was a battle of AFC Titans. Two of the best teams in the entire NFL, both teams undefeated, and it was a great game. Now, it was mostly Steelers for the majority of this game, and the Titans battled back. So I want to talk about the Steelers first because they are just so impressive, and they don't look like most teams in the NFL. I would say they look a lot like the Baltimore Ravens, which they're going to play this week. That's going to be an epic AFC North battle. But the Steelers are just so different in that in a year where there's no crowds, in a league where it's mostly offense, the Steelers are a throwback team. And they have some modern principles in there, and we'll talk about that. But for the most part, the Steelers are going to punch you in the mouth 100 times a game. They play fast, physical, disciplined. All of those old traditional things the coaches teach, the Steelers have it. And that is hats off to Mike Tomlin. It's hats off to the front office for bringing in the right players. And it's hats off to the players for being that tough. It is just incredible. They are such an exhausting team to play against. Whether you're on defense, they are an exhausting offense to handle. They block so well. It's so difficult to get off these blocks. They fly at you, and again, they punch you in the mouth. But beyond that, the ball carriers are tough and nasty. James Conner is having a great season. He's been so good with the ball in his hands. Tough guy to bring down. And then you look at these receivers. A little bit different styles. You got more of an elusive guy in Deontay Johnson, and then you have the more physical guys in Claypool and what he's doing. Obviously, Juju Smith-Schuster. Eric Ebron is a tough guy to bring down. They don't get him the ball a whole lot, but Vance McDonald is a rack machine as well. He's got one of the best stiff arms in the league. So this is just such a tough offense to handle. While they'll have their explosive elements, they'll hit Claypool and James Washington and these guys. They'll hit them vertical. They'll have their vertical shots. But for the most part, this is a death by 1,000 punches offense, and it is just exhausting to handle. And Big Ben is honestly one of the more perfect quarterbacks to execute this offense. There's other guys, but he really fits the mentality of this team. I mean, he made a play where he kind of flipped it, was trying to play extend. He's not super fast anymore, but he'll still extend plays in the way that Big Ben always has. But he had like a underhand flip. It was actually a really impressive play. It went like 10 yards, and I think it was Ebron came down with it, or Johnson or Juju or someone. But it wasn't much. The extent of the play got a few yards out of it. But Jeffrey Simmons, who has been really good for Tennessee, who we'll talk about, hits him late, and Big Ben gets up, and he's talking trash to a 300-pound defensive tackle. I mean, how many quarterbacks are going to do that? I mean, Big Ben does not care. He doesn't care if Jeffrey Simmons comes up, and this is ironic because Jeffrey Simmons literally got in trouble for fighting people. But he doesn't care if Jeffrey Simmons comes up and rips his helmet off. And that's, again, ironic because his backup had his helmet ripped off. This is pretty incredible stuff we got going on right now with how much this is connected. But regardless, Big Ben just fits this perfectly. Now, he as a player has been solid. He hasn't been great. I mean, his downfield accuracy has been enough. It's certainly been good enough that people and Steelers fans wanted to see that deep explosive aspect of the offense restored at least a little bit. But for the most part, it's been throwing screens, slants, not making too many mistakes, executing this short to intermediate passing game that was very apparent that this was going to be the game plan for the Steelers when they go out and bring in Chase Claypool and they bring in the McFarland from Maryland and really surrounded this offense with guys like Juju, Deontay Johnson, who are just really good short to intermediate weapons. And then they have vertical aspects. Again, I don't want Steelers fans to have this takeaway that they aren't an explosive offense. They have some elements of explosion in it. Now, they aren't the Chiefs. They aren't, frankly, the Titans here who have a really good vertical passing game. They aren't other teams that are going to have, like the Seahawks, they aren't going to have this explosive offense that if they were to get into a 35-point shootout that you can truly lean on. But what they do have is this unique style where they're going to punch you in the mouth 1,000 times. And that's not even talking about this defense, which is, to me, the best defense in the NFL. I can't think of a defense right now that I'd rather have. And they didn't even miss Devin Bush. I mean, Robert Spillane comes in as a guy that's been basically a practice squatter for a while, and he comes in and plays fast and hard and stuffs Derrick Henry at the goal line. Like, it's just next man up here in Pittsburgh. It's just more examples of culture wins in the NFL. But it's redundant with the whole punching you in the mouth 1,000 times thing because they blitz, they hit hard, they fly around, they don't miss tackles. They don't have the best secondary in the league, but it doesn't matter because they play so tough. So you really, really have to bring it to beat the Steelers. And I think there's only a few teams in the league that could match this physicality. Now, I don't think they could come out and outscore the Chiefs every time. I think there's worlds where they can beat the Chiefs. I'm really excited to see them play the Ravens, who are in a lot of ways similar. Different styles, but very similar in this physical approach. But like if they went against, say, Seattle, or who are some of these other top teams out there? I think New Orleans could match their physicality. Arizona is rising. There's some teams that are a little more modern and squishy, so to speak. I think they would be in for a rude awakening going against Pittsburgh because at the end of the day, line play to me is still, if it's not number one importance after the quarterback position, it's right there at the top with playmakers and play calling and all of this stuff. If you can control the line of scrimmage and assert your authority on both sides of the ball, you are going to have an advantage in almost every single game you play, and that's what we've seen from Pittsburgh, and I'm so excited to see them go against Baltimore. In particular, Baltimore's defensive line against the offensive line of Pittsburgh, because I do think Pittsburgh's defensive line will have the advantage on Baltimore's blocking that is not up to Pittsburgh's standards. So Pittsburgh's really impressing me. I feel like I've got a pretty good beat on who they are as, the third or fourth team in the league, and they are, I think, a little more matchup dependent because I don't know if they can get into crazy shootouts against specifically the Chiefs, if you want to look in that AFC. But I really think that this is a team that could beat pretty much anyone in the NFL right now. As for Tennessee, I'm trying to be super careful with this team because I feel like I have a pretty good grasp on the Titans, and I've went at it with Titans fans a lot this season. So I predicted them. I would have to go back on the record to see, but I think I had them going 9-7. I did have the Colts winning that division, but I believe I had them going 9-7, and then actually beating the Ravens, getting a wild card win, and then losing probably to the Chiefs in the playoffs. So I see them, and I always have seen them as this really good team, really balanced, top 10-ish on both sides of the ball, who are capable of winning a playoff game, which implies that if they got lucky enough, could win 2, 3, 4 playoff games, as we've seen with teams in years past. Sometimes you just need a little bit of luck. But I don't find that likely. And where does that leave them? I think that leaves them in about the 8-12 range. Now, sure, I ranked them a little bit lower in my power rankings. I think coming into the year, I just got a little bit less excited about their Super Bowl prospects, which may have led them to get rated a little lower. But ultimately, I feel pretty solid about this Titans team as far as who they are, what they are, and how they're going to win games. They're going to score about 25 to 30 points a game, which is really impressive. They have a really good thing going. They have outstanding playmakers. A.J. Brown, Corey Davis, Jonnu Smith, Derrick Henry. They are big plays waiting to happen, which really helps him. And they do block well. Even though they lost Taylor Lewan, they do block really well. Their offensive line held up much better against Pittsburgh than I expected. It wasn't perfect, but all things considered, they did pretty well. And then Ryan Tannehill is a really solid quarterback. I see him as somewhere around the Dak, Kirk Cousins range of quarterbacks, which is higher than I ever thought I would have him, in that 10 to 15 range. I think there's some flaws there. When it gets to third down, I don't think he's the best quarterback in the league or anything. He has some of those same tendencies that we talk about with guys like Derek Carr and Dak Prescott, Kirk Cousins, where out of structure, you need a play on 3rd and 9. Is Ryan Tannehill anywhere close to the top of the list of guys that I'm trusting to sense pressure and know when and how to manipulate the pocket and step up and land a big throw downfield? No, but he does some nice things. I would place him ahead of like Kirk Cousins in that aspect for sure. He throws a good, accurate, deep ball for the most part. Like, he's a really solid quarterback. I think you can win a Super Bowl with Ryan Tannehill, again, if everything goes great. So I like the offense quite a bit. And then defensively, they're solid. They don't have an elite pass rush. They don't have an elite secondary. They're just really balanced and solid, which, Titans fans have complained about the defense. Well, if you look around the league, most teams aren't playing great defense this year. I think they're in that 10 to 12 range. So they're just a really solid team. I feel like I'm going to say that 1,000 times if I don't stop myself, because I'm not going to lie to you and be where Titans fans are and think that the Titans are true contenders in the AFC. And the reason I'm constantly talking down about them is that Titans fans have put that standard on themselves. The Titans have put that standards on themselves by going to the AFC Championship last year, having the expectations that they can take that next step, and I'm just not there. Like, they played really well. They played their ass off against the Steelers. But ultimately, I don't trust them to, even win the AFC, let alone win a Super Bowl. So I'm sorry if that's underwhelming for Titans fans. I just feel like we kind of know what they are. So let's move on. This was a great game. San Francisco at New England. Not this game. The last game was great. This game was not great. I enjoyed it, though, because I am a big Shanahan truther. I caught some flack in the offseason by some. I think most people understand this to be reality, but some people are not here, and it blows my mind that they aren't. That being that Kyle Shanahan is the second best coach in football. And I even went as far as saying that, and this is a good time to bring this up because Bill Belichick being number one, I made the point that as the league becomes more offensive oriented, that Kyle Shanahan as a coach might actually be a better asset to his team than Bill Belichick. And that's saying a lot for those of you that have followed me for a while and know how much respect I have for Bill Belichick. And that kind of showed in this game. Now, I do think that let's rewind a little bit. I just want to say that Kyle Shanahan was in heaven this week in New England. Just probably having the time of his life here, because he had finally, for the first time this year, really everything that he set out to have this year, which is, other than the running backs, but he's shown that the running backs are very much replaceable here. But he had his quarterback and Jimmy Garoppolo healthy. Clearly was moving better this week, I would say. But he had the blocking in front, just dominating up front. And then most importantly, he had the playmakers that he could get this offense going with. And what Kyle Shanahan does with all of this misdirection, he makes everything look the same from a blocking perspective. Almost everything looks like outside zone. But every play is moving dudes around. You have no idea who's getting the ball. It is so creative. And when it's working, it is so freaking difficult to stop. And if Belichick can't figure that out, it's clicking. So that right there is why you can't count these Niners out. There were so many people when I kept them, even at like 14, because they showed some pretty big weaknesses with all these injuries when they got blown out by the Dolphins. But people were putting them down into the 20s, writing them off, and I'm like, I can't write off Kyle Shanahan and all these pieces. Like, they're a couple guys getting healthy away from them being right back in the Super Bowl picture, and I very much think they are. And it's going to be a little different than last year. Last year, they were more of a defensive first team, and then they had these aspects with Kyle Shanahan, but I really think the upside of this offense is higher than it was last year because you have Ayuk in there now. You got Debo, Ayuk, Kittle, and really this thing all working in harmony. Now Debo ends up getting hurt again this week. They're going to have to go back into this trying to find another guy to step up with Debo out. I don't think it's serious. I think he'll be back. But yeah, man, the Niners are just a really freaking good football team, and people cannot count them out. They play the Seahawks this Sunday. That is going to be a freaking, I don't want to say bloodbath, but it's going to be a great game. But yeah, I want to talk about Bill Belichick now because Shanahan got to show off to Bill Belichick and say, I might be the best coach in football right now, especially with the way your team's looking right now. And I don't have any problems with Bill's coaching. Like, he has proved time and time again that he's going to have the answers to the test, that he is the best defensive mind in the history of the league, and frankly, in my opinion, the best coach in sports history. Because to have the dynasty he had in the NFL for 20 years, granted, he had Tom Brady, which helped, but the things he was able to do as far as elevating random-ass dudes in a league that is salary cap driven. This isn't baseball where you can be the Yankees and buy great teams. This is basketball where if you're in a big market, you're going to be good for the most part. You have to be creative with your team building. And for him to do that paired with his coaching ability over that period of time it's just unparalleled in sports, in my opinion. But Bill Belichick in 2020 needs to take a serious look in the mirror, because over the last 2 years, quite frankly, and it pains me to say this, really since the Trent Brown trade and when they won a Super Bowl in 2018 or 2017, whatever year that was, when you signed Gilmore and brought in that really good team, ever since then, they've been a terrible front office. Like, that roster has been just torn to shreds over the last 2 years. And they're not building it back up. That's the problem. And a lot of that comes back to the draft. They're not making big free agency signings. And it doesn't help that a lot of their players opted out, but the guys that opted out outside of Hightower were at pretty replaceable positions. I mean, you're looking at Patrick Chung, who frankly probably wasn't a big piece of the picture there anyway, with Adrian Phillips playing the way he did, with them drafting the Kyle Duggar in the second round. Like, that box safety position was supposed to be figured out, and it hasn't exactly been a problem for them. Hightower was a tough loss. They wanted to keep him after losing most of their linebackers, and he's one of the leaders of their defense. But that's just one player. And then, honestly, you look around, right tackle, Marcus Cannon, he opted out, but they've gotten pretty good play at right tackle. That certainly hasn't been the problem. So, man, I just think Bill Belichick needs to take a serious look in the mirror and reevaluate how he's building this team. They don't have playmakers at all. The quarterback position is in trouble. They didn't keep Tom Brady. Belichick bet on himself that he could sustain this offense, sustain this team without Tom Brady, and so far that has not been the case. So Belichick, not gonna be besmirk, I think is the word I'm looking for. Not trying to besmirk his legacy or anything. I still think he's the greatest coach in the history of sports. But I think he needs to take a look in the mirror and potentially lean on some other people to help rejuvenize and honestly modernize this team. He's a very old thinker, and the lack of explosiveness, especially on this offense, is catching up to this team. Now that is going to bring me to Cam Newton, which I loved the signing at the time. I still like the signing. I think it was a great move. High risk, low reward. High reward, low risk signing for the contract that it was. But I was kind of right about Cam Newton. I think we're safe to say that. Now, I really, really wish that I wasn't almost forced to apologize after he had one unbelievable game. I mean, Cam Newton against the Seattle Seahawks looked like old Cam Newton. It is weird. It is just weird. I mean, I react to the information that I get, and I watched that game, and I watched it again, and he had zip on his ball. He was decisive. He was making good moves, good decisions is what I meant to say. He looked outstanding. The game before that, or was that week 3? Yeah, there's two games before that. He didn't really do much. They won both those games like 20-12, it felt like. And then ever since that game, he has been almost exactly the quarterback that I predicted he would be, which I ranked him like 30th in my preseason quarterback rankings. Is that not about where he's been? He looks like a backup quarterback. He can't push the ball downfield. He's not moving in the pocket. He is standing flat-footed. He is now making poor decisions. It's been terrible. He got benched for Jarrett Stidham in this game. And that's about the Cam Newton that I predicted. Now, I said there was a chance that he would be really good. I just didn't believe in that being the likely outcome. And so far, Cam Newton has been miserable, and I don't see this changing. Now, it does not help that they don't have playmakers there. I will accept that excuse, but that doesn't excuse him being as bad as he's been. I mean, hell, even Kyle Allen looks better in Washington. Like, freaking Joe Flacco the week before with the Jets looked better than Cam Newton has the last 2 weeks. Like, there's only so many excuses you can make for a guy when you play this poorly. All right, so those were kind of, to me, the two most interesting games. Let's keep moving, or at least the two biggest reactions to have. We had Seattle, Arizona. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot more good football to talk about here because this game on Sunday Night Football was a blast. The comeback that the Cardinals had here was crazy. So for me, this is much more about the Cardinals winning this game than it was reacting to Seattle. I will say, like, Seattle has some problems. We'll talk about Seattle. But this was just a huge team win for the Cardinals. You have Kyler Murray, I would say, had his best game of the season. He had the one bad pick in the second half. But for the most part, Kyler was just lights out, using the whole field. The mobility is just insane. He's the best scrambler in the NFL right now, even more than Lamar. Like, Kyler just has such a better feel for, like, when to run. So even if he isn't quite as good as a runner, he just uses his feet in the passing game so much more, just so much better. But you got DeAndre Hopkins going off. The offense in general looks really good. Now, it's not always perfect. It's hard to pinpoint exactly where they have inconsistencies. I think it's just they're young. Kyler isn't the most consistent processor, like playing in rhythm and stuff. There might be stuff that's there that isn't executed. The receivers outside of DeAndre Hopkins can be hit or miss. The blocking isn't great. Like, they're still trying to get this thing going full circle, but for the most part, this offense has arrived. Like, they look outstanding. They're utilizing the entire field in the passing game now, much more over the last couple weeks. They came out the first 2 weeks. They played the Niners and the Washington team, two really good pass rushes, and they said, let's keep this thing contained. Let's keep it to Kyler runs. Let's keep it in the short passing game. Not really expose our offensive line. But now that they're playing worse defenses, they're really pushing the ball downfield. You saw it against the Jets. You saw it this week against Seattle. And with Kyler and Hopkins having this chemistry, it is really fun to watch. We knew it coming in was going to be one of the more fun offenses to watch in the league, and we're now seeing it. But it's not just the offense for Arizona, and that's why it's so exciting. The secondary here for Arizona is one of the best in the league. So you got Byron Murphy in his second year. He was a top 10 player in last year's class that this team took at the very top of the second round, basically a first-round pick. Doesn't have great top speed, but you can see the short area burst, the ability to stick to guys. He just has great quickness and instincts, and he looks great. You have Budda Baker, the highest paid safety in the game right now, flying around the field. He's been much better in coverage this year, too. He's outstanding. He's basically their Tyrann Mathieu. And then Patrick Peterson is still there. He's not what he used to be, but I mean, if he's your number 2 corner, or if Byron Murphy and Pat Pete are both kind of low-end number 1s, that's good enough for me. And then you have Isaiah Simmons. I'm going to include him in the secondary because they drafted him to be an impact in coverage. And he still isn't getting full playing time. I imagine that his interception in overtime here will change that. I mean, he showed the range at middle linebacker. He lines up in that double A-gap kind of mug look and drops back and picks off a 9 route up the seam because he's able to flip his hips and get back, basically, transitioning that free safety skill to the middle linebacker position. It's just rare. And my God, does he look big? He looks every bit 240 pounds, 6'4". Like I think he is at a size. I had some questions of being more of a lengthy, skinnier guy, and at the combine he looked really big and like linebacker-esque, not free safety-esque, if that makes sense. And when he's out there, he fills out his pads. He looks like a linebacker out there, but he moves like a free safety. So let's get on with this. Let's put the number 8 overall pick on the field here, Arizona. He's proved it. So I mean that part of the defense, especially against Seattle, like Seattle wins with their receivers, right? Their offensive line sucks. So Arizona's front seven is not going to get exposed in this matchup. Other games, like if they played Pittsburgh, you're pretty much going to pound it right down Arizona's throat, which is a problem. But in certain matchups where they're not going to have that physical approach, and I think Arizona, when they play San Francisco again, they're going to have a hard time with that offense, which is much more physical. But in a matchup like this, in a finesse matchup, which is what happens when you play the Seahawks right now, they're gonna show. They are absolutely gonna show because that front seven is gonna be able to get after it a little bit more. Now, it is a shame that Chandler Jones is done for the season. I've never been the biggest Chandler Jones guy, but he's obviously a dominant number one edge rusher, and he's done. So they just don't have much of a pass rush. Does Arizona consider sending a second round pick to Houston for J.J. Watt? I think that could be a great move for them. It could help the front seven, both in the run game and in the pass rush. And if they could get that force back, this defense to me would be at least top 16 paired with a top 10 offense. That's a big step up for Arizona as far as what they were projected. And they could seriously compete in this NFC West. I mean, they have 2 wins against 2 of the top contenders in this division. Now, they've beat Seattle and they beat San Francisco. So if they're getting up to 10, 11 wins, those are going to be serious tiebreaker considerations. I do think that a trade for a guy like J.J. Watt would really set them over the edge on that. Pun unintended on that one, being an edge player for J.J. Watt. Now, for Seattle, I'm certainly not worried about Seattle. They were my NFC Super Bowl pick. I feel like that's always a nice crutch when I'm about to talk down on a team because it shows you that I do like Seattle and I'm pulling for them. They have some issues. I dropped them in my power rankings this week because defensively they're a mess right now. Now, they traded for Carlos Dunlap, which was my second trade prediction for the Seahawks this year. Seahawks fans certainly hope that my preseason predictions of this team's success is going to be identical to my trade predictions for this team because I predicted that the Seahawks would trade 2 firsts and Bradley McDougald for Jamal Adams, and that happened to a T. And then a couple days ago, I predicted that the Seahawks would trade for Carlos Dunlap, and they did. So hopefully for Seahawks fans, my NFC Championship prediction of them can hold up. This was a huge problem for the Seahawks, was pass rush, and Carlos Dunlap is a very low-end number 1, high-end number 2. In a lot of ways, he is an almost identical player to Jadeveon Clowney. People wouldn't like to admit that, but it's very true. A very similar pass rush production and run defense grades. So Dunlap's an excellent fit. He's going to plug right in. He could start next week as that edge defensive end in a 4-3 scheme. Like, he's just a perfect scheme fit, team fit, need fit, everything. And he's going to be rejuvenated to come to Seattle because he was not happy in Cincinnati. And then Jamal Adams has not been out there for Seattle. You got to keep that in mind as well. So you could add Carlos Dunlap getting the pass rush going, and then you add Jamal Adams, which is just, I mean, he makes everything better. He makes the pass rush better, the run defense better, the coverage unit better. He is just the ultimate superstar. So you get those 2 back in there, and this Seahawks defense could get rejuvenated and bumped up a little bit. And then you don't have to lean on Russ quite so much. But until they do that, they're going to have some problems. But I'm not worried about Seattle. Russ made some bad mistakes in this game, but, I mean, God, he is the best deep ball thrower in the history of this league. It's the moon ball is what it's being called now. Just a dominant game vertically for Russell Wilson. Some of the rhythm stuff, some of the mistakes were there this week. Again, I'm not worried about the Seahawks, but a temporary pause on their elite season. Let me grab this sip of water as we move to the next game. All right. Chicago at the LA Rams. I gotta play a little clip here. I gotta have a little fun here.
I mean, we just the Bears are what we thought they were. What we thought they were. We played them in preseason. Who the hell takes a third game in a preseason like it's bull? We played them in the third game. Everybody played 3 quarters. The Bears are who we thought they were. That's why we took the damn field. Now, if you want to crown them, then crown their ass. But they are who we thought they were. And we got them off the hook.
Tell them, Dennis. Yeah, the Bears are who we thought they were. Look, there's a lot of good Bears fans that were with me, ranking them like 15th in the league, not really taking them too seriously. They were one of the worst 4-1 teams by DVOA in like the last 20 years. So a lot of good Bears fans. I know a lot of good Bears fans that are very smart, and I'm not talking to you because I appreciate you. But there was a lot of very loud, I don't want to call you dumb, just a lot of loud Bears fans, very passionate, trusting Bears fans that were coming at me, saying some pretty mean things. So I'm sorry, I'm going to have a little fun with you, Bears fans. Like, I talked about this last week on the podcast. Did you just start watching football yesterday? Did the 2018 mean nothing to you? Did the 2017 Jags mean nothing to you? It's an offensive league. Having a good defense is important, but you need an offense to complement it if you want to expect high-level success. Having this defense, like the Bears are right there with the Steelers as far as the best defense in the league. That's great. But you can't complement that with Nick Foles and one of the 3 worst offenses in the league. Like the Bears are legitimately right there with the Washington football team. Wouldn't quite put them there with the Jets because the Jets are a disaster in their own right. But, I mean, the Bears have a legitimately terrible offense. It is a terrible unit. They cannot move the ball. They cannot score points. So the Bears are who we thought they were. They're a good football team. They're going to try to win every game, holding the opponent to 14 points. And it's just not, you're not going to hold Sean McVay and the Rams to 14 points. You might do it 1 out of 10 times. Like, are you going to be the miracle team? You play them 10 times and they might win 9, but not today. Like, that's what the Bears are trying to do every week against everybody. And sometimes they'll get away with it. Sometimes they won't. So the Bears are who we thought they were. As for the Rams, like, honestly, their offense is good enough that no matter who they're playing, they're going to show up as long as they come out, play fast, execute their system. They're going to score 17-plus points. So that, they were always going to win this game to me. Now, from like my Patreon picks and stuff, I didn't say take the 6 points. Like, the Bears are a good team. Like, they can keep the game close and try to win it nasty. But the Rams, they came out, they played hard and fast. Credit to them. This is what they've done. They've been a very consistent, steady unit on that side of the ball. And then defensively, like, they're an underrated defense. And sometimes you'll go against Kyle Shanahan and he'll understand the weaknesses in your defense. Most offenses aren't going to be that smart, and they're going to let Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey wreck your game, and that's what happened here. Aaron Donald, again, elite performance. If the MVP wasn't such a quarterback-driven award, Aaron Donald deserves the MVP right now. He has been back and better than ever. That clown on ESPN, I'm not even going to do the respect of giving his name. I tweeted about this, and a lot of you guys know who I'm talking about, but there's a guy that works for ESPN who's like trying to make a case that Aaron Donald is a overrated player because he's like not as good against the run as people think. Like, I guess I get your point, but that's not why Aaron Donald gets paid $25 million. He doesn't get, that's why they draft Greg Gaines in the 4th round, who was great in this game, to play a couple extra early downs against the run. They're paying Aaron Donald to get 10 pressures a game and game-wrecking sacks like he did again this week. He's just incredible. He's the best player in football. Not the most valuable player in football. You're taking Russ. You're taking Mahomes. If the Rams could package Jared Goff and Aaron Donald for Patrick Mahomes or Russell Wilson, I think they'd probably do it. But probably. Goff's been pretty solid, so it's hard to say. But, he's just incredible. And I was saying on Twitter, like, the fact that someone has the take that Aaron Donald is overrated makes me feel better about any bad takes I've had, because at least it's not that dumb, and that guy works for ESPN, so how bad could I really be doing? All right, Giants at Eagles. Where do we start here? Well, let's start with the Giants. They're trying. Like, they almost won. I'm having a hard time coming up with something to say about them. Like, they're getting better. Their defense has impressed me. I've said that now for a few weeks. But ultimately, Joe Judge seems pretty solid. I'm kind of buying in. Like, he's got the team playing really hard, which is more than I would have expected. Their win total's been on par with my 1-win projection of them. So they're working together. They're building something. But at the end of the day, Daniel Jones just ain't it. Like, he just ain't it. There's a lot of Giants fans that are out like me. There's Giants fans that are still believing in him. And this to me it's Ryan Tannehill in Miami. And sure, Tannehill went and had this magical career resurgence, but it was Tannehill in Miami. It was Marcus Mariota in Tennessee. It was Blake Bortles in Jacksonville. It was Mitchell Trubisky with Chicago. It's now, I feel like I'm kind of doing this with Derek Carr, but Carr's been fine. But you got to reach a point where you decide, how bad of a quarterback are you willing to settle on? Because, and how long are you willing to sit around and wait? Daniel Jones, I said it coming into the year, is a turnover wreck. He is Jameis Winston. He's going to have explosive plays. But there's so many facepalm moments every week, and it's so consistent with Daniel Jones, that how long are you going to be willing to trade 300 yards and 2 touchdowns for 2 back-breaking turnovers on a pretty consistent basis? It's just not a sustainable way to win. And I've seen people turn it around. Like, we've seen what Tannehill's done, but how long are you willing to sit around and wait and hope that is the case with your team, and that he's not Blake Bortles, and he's not Mitchell Trubisky, and that he is Ryan Tannehill? And Tannehill, like, they had different problems. Tannehill was never this turnover machine. He was just under the Adam Gase umbrella that we're now learning might have been the problem. So, yeah, just where are we going with the Giants? Like, I don't see them. I don't see Dave Gettleman admitting that he was wrong on Daniel Jones and, drafting a Trey Lance or drafting a Justin Fields. I don't think they'll be bad enough to get Lawrence. If they end up with the first pick, you take Lawrence. That's a no-brainer. So it's just kind of where are we going? Like, I think they can be a solid team. They have some talent. They're doing some nice things from a coaching perspective. But where are we truly going with this? Is it going to be 2 years from now they finally move on from Daniel Jones and it's like, oh, about time? As for the Eagles, what a weird season. They are going to win the NFC East, like, by default. They might win the NFC East with 5 or 6 wins, which is just crazy. Carson Wentz is not the elite quarterback that I've been kind of preaching for a while. Like, I'll admit that. He's made enough mistakes. He's been inconsistent enough that he hasn't. I will stand by that he should have been the MVP if he didn't get injured. Even with the injury, I thought he was the MVP in 2017 or whatever year that was. He was an elite quarterback in that season. And I thought that as he got healthy, he would return to that level. And he simply has not. He's had great moments this year. I think he's been much better. I think people want to really grab onto those first 2 weeks where he was so bad. He's been a really good quarterback. He's been a top 10 quarterback now for the last month of the NFL season. I feel like he's back to at least being a really good quarterback, and again, probably being underrated. But I will admit that I just don't know if and when he's ever going to get back to that MVP level where he was unstoppable on a drive-to-drive basis, because right now the rhythm is not there, the accuracy is not there, and he's making mistakes. But he will make up for it with some miraculous stuff. And he had a couple of drops that just really hurt his team's chances in this game. A big missed field goal before half. The Eagles just find new ways to shoot themselves in the foot every single week. I point to Doug Peterson, and it's a combination of two things. And this is kind of the take that, just like I'm out on Daniel Jones, I'm officially out on Doug Peterson. They're going to win the NFC West, NFC East. They might get hot and win a playoff game because they have a lot of talent on this team. That's always been the case. But I'm sick of this team failing to meet expectations. They have one of the best rosters in football. Now, it's been depleted by injuries. The offensive line has fallen apart. The playmakers aren't there on offense. And maybe that's not fair to say they have the best roster, one of the best rosters in the NFL. They have a ton of talent, nonetheless. And they just don't get it out of these guys. And it's, to me, Doug Peterson's play calling is so bad. It stood out last year. It really did. And I started to make this take that I just don't think Doug Peterson's a good coach. I think he really benefited from having Frank Reich when they won the Super Bowl. I don't think he's done anything impressive since they won that Super Bowl. They've gotten lucky with their division sucking and scraped into the playoffs a couple times. But I don't think Doug Peterson's a good coach, and he doesn't have the team ready to play every week. Most weeks they're unprepared and they make stupid mistakes. And it's everywhere. It's blown coverages on defense. It's drops on offense. It's bad play calling on offense. It's missed field goals. It just shows up in different places every week. And to me, I point to Doug Peterson. So I'm kind of done with Doug Peterson, but if they end up winning the NFC East again, you probably don't fire Doug Peterson. So they're kind of stuck in this like Mike McCarthy purgatory, honestly, with their coaching staff. And we'll get to Mike McCarthy. Next up, we have the Jets-Bills game. I mean, I'm not worried about the Bills, but they didn't look great in this game. They're right around that 10 spot where I've had them. Bills fans thought they were a top 5 team the first few weeks. I didn't go that far. Good team. They have explosive elements. Defense was much better this week. It was against the Jets. I think the Bills will be fine. I'm still taking them to win the AFC East and maybe a playoff game. But they do kind of lack some of that attention to detail. I'm not really putting them as a contender in the AFC. They're kind of right behind the Titans to me. But, the Bills were kind of who we thought they were. I guess they deserved more points than 18 points this week. They moved the ball really well, but they didn't finish drives. And Allen was so-so. Hit or miss, I would say. And then for the Jets, they've been a little more competitive the last couple weeks. Quinnen Williams looks really good. The defense is at least settling in. There was some moments in this game for Darnold. I feel bad for Darnold. I feel like they were kind of trying to get some things going in the second half. He hits a really nice ball to an out to Barrios, and Barrios just isn't going to come down with that ball. It was, a contested out route, but that's about as good as you're going to get on 3rd and 10 for the Jets, which they get a lot of 3rd and longs. He put it where only his guy would get it, and Barrios just couldn't come down with it. And other than that, they didn't block for him, they didn't make plays for him. He's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it just, they don't have a chance on offense. It's really kind of sad to see. They did change play callers, which I think the players appreciated, and the playmaking did seem better this week. But let's move on. Carolina, New Orleans. Carolina's a fun team to watch. I'm excited for, I think this will be a decent Thursday night football game. Teddy Bridgewater is just a solid starting caliber quarterback. He's doing exactly what they could have hoped, and he's making a lot of money. It's just great to see him bounce back. I liked Teddy coming out of Louisville. It's good to see him kind of finding a place where they can utilize his skill sets the best. He's having a really good year. It's been fun to watch. He moves around in the pocket well. He's accurate. He's been making some pretty nice throws on the move. Again, there's a certain limited upside with his lack of physical traits, but I mean, you could do a hell of a lot worse than Teddy Bridgewater. I mean, if Teddy Bridgewater was with the Bears right now, they'd be right there with the Packers in the NFC North. I mean, seriously, depending on how well that offense came together. But he's been that good. And that Bears defense is that good. But anyway, Brian Burns for the Panthers. The Panthers defense struggled this week, but Brian Burns just pops, man. He is different. He's 6'5", 250-pound edge rusher in year 2. I liked Brian Burns as a prospect. I had him as a top 15 player. Some people were crazy high on him, and credit to those people. I mean, Burns looks like he's going to be legit. I think if you ask me, would you rather have Clelin Ferrell, Rashawn Gary, Josh Allen, or Brian Burns, all 4 of those guys, edge rushers in that class, and Montez Sweat was in that class too. If you ask me to take one of those 5, see, this is where I put myself in a bad position, because if I answer this wrong, I get exposed. It's definitely not Ferrell, and it's definitely not Sweat, and those guys were way behind those top 3. I do think Gary turns out. But I'm probably taking Burns over him. And then with Josh Allen, he's been out for most of this year, but Allen had a good week this week. I think he's right there with Allen. They're a little different players, but regardless, Brian Burns looks awesome. This looks like a great pick for Carolina. The fact that 3 other edge players went ahead of him in that class, it was just a great pick. It reminds me a lot of Randy Gregory and Alden Smith in their prime, of Robert Quinn in his prime, with just that elite bend and burst off the edge. Like, he just flies off the ball. I still wish he had more of an element of power, because I think tackles can really come prepared for him. And to be fair, he only had 1 pressure in this game, technically, but he showed much more than that. And when you're going against Drew Brees, who's getting rid of the ball so quick, you're not going to get a ton of pressures. But speaking of Drew Brees for the Saints, he is balling out. There's people in the comments of my YouTube power rankings saying that the Saints need to be taken out of the top 10. I could not disagree more. I mean, they're out here. They're still winning games. And they're putting up like 30 points a week. Yeah, Drew Brees isn't, Patrick Mahomes. We all agree with that. But he is still balling out. And he's doing it without Michael Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders. That's only going to make things better. I mean, they literally, crafted this offense around those guys. And he's been lights out. He's throwing to Callaway out of Tennessee and a bunch of randos. Alvin Kamara's been great. I wish the Saints' defense was a little better, but they are absolutely a top 10 team. They are absolutely a top 10 team. And they're a Super Bowl contender. Like, they are hanging around here. Drew Brees is on this mission right now to prove everyone wrong, because he's been just dumped on. And just keep in mind, like, this team was all in on this year, and they know it. Like, this team is going to be there in January. They are going to be a headache. And I don't know if they'll win a playoff game. The NFC is pretty good. Depends on who they match up on, I guess. But I am by no means counting the Saints out of the Super Bowl race right now. Then we have Cleveland, Cincinnati. So let's start with Cincinnati. Zach Taylor is losing this team. And I was kind of early on this. Of all the coaching hires that year, Zach Taylor to me was just the guy that was like, I don't see this working. He didn't have a great track record. He's supposed to be, the next McVay. And even LaFleur, I felt like was more accomplished and a more well-versed candidate. I feel like of all the jokes about, like, you just got hired because you know Sean McVay, I think Zach Taylor was the guy that was literally like, yeah, you just got hired to replicate this scheme that you kind of know. And he's losing the team. They aren't a cohesive team. The defense stinks, and it's not for a lack of talent. That's the thing that bothers me about the Bengals. And you can say Taylor's an offensive guy, but that's the point of the head coach hiring, is you are not just responsible to be an offensive coordinator, which I'm Taylor could go and be an offensive coordinator somewhere. He might be pretty good at it. He's still young, but you hire a guy to get your team to be a football team. And you compare him to, Matt LaFleur is a great comparison as a young guy that was the next Sean McVay. Matt LaFleur has gotten the Packers to be a much better team. Their defense has skyrocketed. They are more disciplined. Their special teams is better. Matt LaFleur has understood those things. He's invested in those things. He's hired the right people on those sides of the ball. Zach Taylor, on the other hand, is losing his players. Carlos Dunlap had a hissy fit. He was like, I can't do this anymore. I need to play for a real organization. And when do you kind of, even if the offense is working here, if you're Cincinnati, don't you say, like, we got to do better for Joe Burrow here? We got to give him more of a defense. We got to give him a better team. It's kind of the inverse of what Arizona did. They had Cliff Kingsbury. They kind of liked Josh Rosen, but they really liked Kyler Murray. So if you're Cincinnati, you have a young Joe Burrow. Like, why wouldn't you go get Joe Brady? Reunite Joe Brady with Joe Burrow. Or go get Eric Bieniemy. Get a real high-end coach candidate. And sure, Joe Brady's really young. It might be the same thing with Taylor where he can't get this defense to work. But at least Taylor has shown that he can't do that. And I think Brady is a much more qualified offensive coordinator candidate. So, Cincinnati's showing some nice things. Jesse Bates, a rock star. Logan Wilson kind of shows up all over the place. I liked him coming out. I wish they would have drafted an offensive lineman instead. But I do like that they got B.J. Finney for Dunlap. They're pretty deep at that edge position. I don't think they're going to miss Dunlap that much. But yeah, Cincinnati they have the quarterback now, but you got to Cincinnati has not been the greatest run organization for the last decade. Hasn't been terrible, but they got to figure some of these things out organizationally with the coach and get these players happy. There was a couple weeks there where AJ Green wasn't trying. He's trying now. I don't know if Taylor said something to him or they told him if you play well, we'll trade you or something. But AJ Green is at least playing well now. I will say he's still lacking some of that it factor. He doesn't look all that fast, and he's not really coming down with tough contested catches like he used to. He's producing. He's been a volume receiver, but I'm not all about AJ Green right now. I haven't been that impressed. Now, one guy that has impressed me is T. Higgins. I was higher on T. Higgins in the draft. I'll take a short victory lap on this one. In particular, I liked him a lot more than Michael Pittman. I never understood that. Draft Twitter really pushed T. Higgins down and bumped Michael Pittman up, and I never really understood that because T. Higgins, to me, was always just a better version of Pittman. I liked his ball skills better. I liked his routes much better. T. Higgins, when I dove into it, he actually had some finesse to his routes. He set some guys up on some double moves deep. He tracks the ball. It's outstanding. So I like T. Higgins a lot, and I think I don't know if you trade A.J. Green, but I do think this is A.J. Green's last year in Cincinnati because you got Higgins, you got Boyd. That can work if you do everything else right. Kind of talking in circles here for the Bengals. Let's go on to the Browns. Really great game for Baker Mayfield. Started really bad. The interception he threw was not good. He underthrew it deep to Odell. Odell's out for the year. That hurts the Browns for sure. But I will say, Donovan Peoples-Jones really stepped up in this game. The game-winning touchdown. And Baker, by the way, I think it was other than a spiked ball, Baker completed, if you take the spiked ball out on that game-winning drive, I want to say he completed 22 passes in a row. He started, it was crazy. He started 0-5 with an interception, a bad interception. And then he went on and completed every pass for the rest of the game other than a spike. Crazy stuff. He was lights out. And the throw he made, they were in field goal range to tie it up on third down or maybe second down with not much time left. And Baker was like, screw it. I'm going to take a shot to Donovan Peoples-Jones, 6th-round rookie, back corner of the end zone. Just goes to show you, you can't defend a perfect pass, and that's what that was. Back shoulder, he gets his head around, catches it, toe tap. Great catch from Peoples-Jones. I liked that pick for them as a high upside, good fit in the offense. So excited to see. He's going to get a great opportunity. Fantasy football, go grab Donovan Peoples-Jones because they run a lot of 2 wide receiver sets. Depends how deep your league is because they do like Higgins, but I just think Peoples-Jones has such a higher upside to be the actual starter here. And it's a little reminiscent of Chase Claypool, honestly, because these guys weren't dissimilar. Claypool's a better athlete, so he's showing out a little more. But Peoples-Jones, former 5-star receiver, just like Claypool, who had to play with Ian Book, Donovan Peoples-Jones had to play his whole career with Chase McSorley, who can't throw a deep ball. Well, Baker can throw a deep ball, so there could just be a misevaluation or just a misuse of Peoples-Jones from his college days. He showed some nice flashes. I thought it was a good pick. I had a 3rd to a 4th round grade on Peoples-Jones. I think I had a 2nd on Claypool. But my last note here is the Browns rookie class. It's one of their better rookie classes. I mean, yeah, the Baker Ward class was solid, but the Browns haven't been great at hitting on later round picks. They really haven't. It's been a big problem for them. Part of it is coaching and culture and development, and I think Stefanski has proved that he is a legitimate coach. I mean, he loses Odell Beckham on the 6th offensive snap of this game, maybe the 3rd offensive snap of this game, and they go out and they light up the scoreboard. I mean, Stefanski, great hiring for Cleveland. I think they finally got their coach. So maybe that plays into this rookie class actually working out, but you have Jedrick Wills, who never should have been available when the Browns picked, but you get Jedrick Wills, who's been a stud at tackle. Donovan Peoples-Jones looks like a hit. We'll see what his career looks like. Harrison Bryant, he wasn't supposed to play here because he's like the 3rd tight end, but he was another guy that they got way late. Like he was one of the best tight ends in that class for sure. He's a smooth route runner. He's been blocking much better than I anticipated. He's been really good. He's been getting to play because of some injuries and illnesses and stuff, but stepped up this week. Jordan Elliott, a defensive tackle out of Missouri, has been pretty solid. And they haven't even had Grant Delpit out there, who unfortunately had the ankle injury. We'll see if he shows up, but I like that pick as well. So the Browns rookie class, it hasn't just been top-heavy. It's been balanced. They've gotten guys in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round, 6th round, I think, for Peoples-Jones. Could be just a total steal. So there's that game. This next game is going to go quickly. Dallas and Washington. Honestly, Dallas Cowboys, if you're not going to show up, I'm not going to talk about you. That was absolutely pathetic. Mike McCarthy was clearly carried by Aaron Rodgers for a decade. Until you prove me that you can play with any sort of a cohesive game plan and effort and give a damn, I'm just not going to talk about you. Like, that was just absolutely embarrassing, whatever the Dallas Cowboys put up. Yeah, that was brutal. As for Washington, I really don't have much to say. I think even the New York Jets would have beaten Dallas this last Sunday with the effort that they put up. Their defense is good. There's no denying that. Their D-line secondary combination is really promising. So Rivera is cancer-free now, which makes me very happy because I can look at this without having to, hopefully it's, this doesn't come back. I'm genuinely happy. Like, he seems like such a outstanding culture-building coach. And I think this hire was great because Washington needed to set the floor a little higher, which they're clearly doing. And I think it's so cool that this narrative here is, we know we're not very good, but hell, we have a chance at this division with 6 wins, which that's a gift. And they're just kind of playing as hard as they possibly can. I think Kyle Allen is a perfect fit there. I wish that it was a better scenario where Alex Smith could actually play and have some success, but when you don't have an offensive line and you don't have any receivers, Alex Smith is not the quarterback you want. You want the Kansas City offense where he can use his brain and distribute the ball to other guys to carry the team. Whereas Kyle Allen, like, he's going to run around, he's going to do some fun stuff. He has some better physical traits to elevate some of that stuff. So I kind of think that's a good fit. And they're just trying to build a high floor. But I do think that they will reach a point, and I just don't feel comfortable doing this on a week where Rivera, like, this is a big positive week for Rivera. I'll just leave it at I don't know if he's the long-term answer. I kind of look at him as the Teddy Bridgewater to the Washington organization. Like, he's going to lift everything up. He's going to set a new standard. But I don't know if he's the guy that's going to eventually take them to greatness. I hope I'm wrong. That would be absolutely amazing for everyone involved there. Like, what a turnaround that would be. I don't know if he has the skill set to win a Super Bowl. He technically got there with Carolina. So maybe they get some elite defense and can totally do that. I'm here for it. I just wouldn't predict that. So I'll just leave it at that and say, go prove me wrong, Rivera. Year 3, year 4, this is a long-term rebuild here. Go win a Super Bowl. Hopefully your organization, you can figure out a quarterback situation. Okay, so we have 5 games left. We're doing all right. Detroit and Atlanta. I want to take a couple minutes to appreciate Matthew Stafford. Just what a game-winning performance from Stafford. It was such typical fashion for Stafford. Made some amazing throws. I mean, there was a couple games. I was watching the game next to my fiance, who Anna, she's a big football fan, but she doesn't really pay attention when I'm watching games. So I normally don't react. I just kind of watch there and quietly. But I was like, whoa. Or I was like, what was the delivery? I was like, whoa. And she was like, what? Like something serious happened. Nothing serious, but I was just like in awe of some of the throws Stafford made. I think there was a couple throws in this one. I think it was right before half. They were trying to go and score, and he threw an in route to Galladay at like 20 yards. It was a little sidearmed, and he just, what a missile. Like, he has an absolute piss missile of an arm. Just needed to be reminded that. And he does enough with his feet to set up some of these crazy throws. Now, there's never been that, I use this word a lot, but that cohesiveness with Detroit. And I think part of that is Stafford. Like, I don't think he's the best in rhythm. He's good in rhythm, but he's not a a sharp attention to details kind of quarterback. And that's, I think, always been the thing that sets him back. Now, he's weeded out some of those stupid mistakes he used to make. Like, he doesn't turn the ball over too much nowadays. But he doesn't have that sort of meticulous approach as a quarterback that his counterpart in this game. I mean, the difference between Matt Ryan and Matthew Stafford, they've always kind of hovered around the same ranking for me, the two Matts. But they're so different in style. Like, Matt Ryan is all rhythm, all letting the guys around him carry the team. If you have a good surrounding core, I want Matt Ryan. If you don't, I want Matthew Stafford. But the plays he made to win this game for Detroit, and I won't beat the drum on Todd Gurley and not scoring at the end here that allowed Detroit to come back. But I mean, that's why you're an interim coach. I don't even know who the Atlanta guy is. I don't even recognize him he's got his bandana on and he wears a hat. So I can barely see who it is. But yeah, that's why you're an interim head coach, because you just take a knee and kick the field goal and you win the game. Instead, they hand the ball to Gurley. Sure, Gurley should have had better awareness and gone down, but I put that more on the coach than on Gurley. But yeah, so Stafford gets the ball with a minute left, down by 6, and he made some of the 3 or 4 most incredible plays to complete that drive. He threw a seed over the middle to Galladay. I think it was Galladay. It might have been Marvin Jones. And then he hits another seed over the middle to Galladay. And then the game-winning touchdown was awesome. I mean, that is, to me, the difference between Matthew Stafford, who I do have as a top 10 quarterback, and some of these other guys like Tannehill, Dak, Kirk Cousins, Jared Goff. Like, he got pressured. So many quarterbacks in that moment are going to be like, crap, I'm about to get sacked. I need to just put this ball in position for one of my guys to make the play. But Stafford has that ability to say, nope, I can't settle for that. Even though I have Kenny Galladay, I can't settle for a 10% fade to the back corner of the end zone, which a lot of quarterbacks will settle for. He says, okay, let's avoid this. Let's buy enough time. He steps up and just, you could almost tell, like, he saw Hawkinson open up, started his motion with a little bit of anticipation, and was just so fluid the way he finished that game off. I wish he was more consistent and could see the field much better. But there are some times when you watch Stafford play and you're just like, man, that was special. That most quarterbacks can't do what Matthew Stafford just did. So I want to have some Matthew Stafford appreciation. Detroit is not too shabby. But again, with Detroit, it's the attention to detail stuff. It's the play-to-play consistency. It's the identity of the team. Who are the Detroit Lions? Are they a running team? Not really. Are they a pure vertical passing team? Maybe they are, but it's not at the level of some of these other great vertical offenses. Are they a defensive-oriented team? They're supposed to be, but they're not a great defense. It's just a team that has a lot of potential. I look at Matt Patricia and say, you have a chance to save your job here. Like, you really do. You're 3-3. You had some tough losses early on, like really close games. You got talent on both sides of the ball. They just traded for Everson Griffin. Excited to see how he fits in to maybe improve this pass rush that is just god-awful. I mean, Trey Flowers was just such a flop of a signing. It always was going to be. But maybe if you get another Trey Flowers in there and Everson Griffin, you can balance that out. As for Atlanta, before they won against Minnesota, I was really in on them going for Trevor Lawrence and going full tank and trading Matt Ryan, trading Julio, but I get the sense that that's not where this is going now that the trade deadline is closing. I feel like Julio Jones wants to get traded. I know he's never been much of a rah-rah guy, but his body language he's out there kicking ass and taking names, but his body language looks bad. Like, he just doesn't really look like he wants to be there. I feel like he's like, can I go to Baltimore? Can I go to Green Bay, please? Like, I kind of want another chance at a Super Bowl here before I'm done, and I know that we're not going to get there with this team. But I don't necessarily know where this is going. I think it's going to come down to what kind of coach they get. Because if they end up with, Brian Daboll could be a good coach, but let's use him as an example of a guy that would be, say, the third or fourth best candidate. So say you're getting an average coaching candidate. I don't know if they're going to – sorry about that. I don't know if they're going to necessarily be like having the confidence to go with a rookie and get rid of Matt Ryan and Julio Jones. Like, if you're Brian Daboll and you just gonna want to kind of establish yourself as a good head coach, you probably stick with Matt Ryan and Julio. But, yeah, I don't really know where this is going. It could go anywhere from full – trade everyone, tank, rebuild, start from the bottom up, to a try to win in the next 2 years type of rebuild with Matt Ryan and Julio on the last end of their careers. But I think it could go any way of those directions, and everything just short of winning a Super Bowl. I don't think they're going to win a Super Bowl in the next 2 or 3 years. I think their best chance to a Super Bowl in the next 10 years, frankly, is to do the full tear-it-down rebuild approach and go for Trevor Lawrence. All right, Green Bay, Houston. Let's start with the Houston side of the ball. These players look fed up, especially on defense. It's hard. I've talked about this, but when you go into a season with expectations like this, it is really hard to suck. And I think especially hitting J.J. Watt hard. There was a funny press conference. He just wanted nothing to do with it. He did not want to be there. The poor guy asking the question was, just trying to, talk about Aaron Rodgers and get some good content. And he's like, what did Aaron Rodgers do well that worked against your defense? It wasn't the best question. It wasn't the most pinpointed, question, but J.J. Watt's just like sitting there with a blank face, and he's like, he threw the ball to his receivers, and they caught it. Thanks, J.J. We'll see you next week. He doesn't want to be there. I would trade J.J. Watt. You're not going to win a Super Bowl next year. He's on the back end of his both contract and career. I know he's a franchise staple, but I would ask him, like, do you want us to trade you? I feel like his answer would be yes, and trade him. I mean, Arizona would be such a cool spot for J.J. Watt. As for the Packers, clearly a very good team. I wish they had another receiver. It comes back to the offseason. There's reports that they're calling the Texans about Fuller, which if you put Will Fuller in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams and that run game, that just opens everything up. I thought they should have drafted DK Metcalf. I thought they should have drafted Hollywood Brown. And they didn't, and they're stuck with the trash can with legs that is Marquez Valdes-Scantling. I think he actually has some kind of complex where the football reflects off of his breath, because he truly does have some of the worst hands I've ever seen from an NFL football player. Just terrible. And it's been so consistent for years. I'm surprised Rodgers still throws in the ball, honestly. But if you put Will Fuller there, and it's risky because he's an injury-prone guy, but my God, does this offense just open up? I mean, picture the play-action stuff with the vertical threat of Will Fuller, with the short to intermediate threat of Devontae Adams, with the run threat of that scheme and that blocking, the mobility threat of Aaron Rodgers. I mean, that would just open everything up. I think that would make them a legitimate Super Bowl contender. Not that they aren't right now. Like, I just think it would dramatically increase their chances. Just make that offense so much more explosive. And then the last note I had on Green Bay is that Jair Alexander remains a top corner, if not the top corner in the NFL. They have something truly special in him. He is getting better every week. He is everything you look for in a corner. I wouldn't be stunned if we start putting him in the elite top 3 corner conversation if we haven't already. All right, Tampa Bay and Las Vegas. I'm not going to beat this point to death, but Tampa Bay really is on the trajectory that I projected. I had them going to the NFC Championship. I think, did I have them? I had them as the second best team in the NFC. Did I have them the best team in the NFC? Yeah, I had them 4th this week, which was the best team in the NFC. I mean, they beat down on the Packers last week, but this trajectory of them getting better week by week is really coming to fruition, and I didn't even know Antonio Brown was going to be a part of the picture. Now, Godwin went out with, I think, a broken finger, so he's going to miss a few weeks, and then Brown will be back like week 10, or be in there week 10, and then the defense just keeps getting better week by week. I wish, from a gambling perspective, I wish they would have lost to Green Bay, because I said it on this podcast 2 weeks ago. Maybe bet on them to Super Bowl, or maybe see if they lose to Green Bay and then bet on the Super Bowl at like 25-1. Because right now they got to be like 7 or 8-1. Like they got to be up there for the Super Bowl odds. And I didn't do it. I had them to win the South, the NFC South, but I wish I did that before the Packers game. Anyway, Tom Brady's heating up. It honestly could be much better. He's dropping dimes. He looks great, but there's actually some meat left on the bones for this offense, especially if they could get all these receivers healthy. I don't know if there's ever been a better receiving core, 1 through 3. I really don't. If you had a healthy Godwin, healthy Evans, healthy Antonio Brown, you could realistically be talking about 3 of the top 10 receivers in the NFL. I don't think Mike Evans is. I never really have. He's been around that range, but, I mean, you can make a case for any of those 3. And I think Antonio Brown, I mean, as far as that signing goes, I think it has a high likelihood of working out. I mean, it's hard to predict. Bruce Arians did say any BS and he's out of here, which I think should be the right approach. But I think after serving the suspension, getting his chance with Tom Brady again, I think it'll probably work out this time. He's been out of the headlines. He hasn't done anything crazy. Hopefully he's gotten some help mentally. So I forgot I do need to react to the Antonio Brown signing. I think it probably works out at a very high level. I think the Bucs are the biggest threat right now to my Seahawks NFC Championship pick preseason. But at least to my credit, I had them playing the Bucs in the NFC Championship. And the Packers, if they could go get a receiver, I would put them in there. For the Raiders, pretty on par for them. The defense just wasn't that good, as they tend to not be there for the Raiders. Derek Carr made some plays, left some on the turf. My problems with Derek Carr on third down and leaving a lot of meat on the bones, there was such a classic play. They were down 2 scores, second half, and they eventually got this thing pretty close, but it's like 2nd and 10, and it was so typical Derek Carr. The Bucs sent a 3-man rush, so there's really no threat, and Derek Carr can do all these things, right? He can extend plays. He's just what drives me crazy is how much meat he leaves on the bones. Like, he's eating his rib every play, and he'll just nibble it off. So often, he just nibbles it off, throws it in the trash, when there's plenty of room for him to use his feet. There was a play where there's a 3-man rush, and he drifts a little bit, but instead of running and seeing if something opens up, which so often it does, letting these great receivers work back to you, he just takes the check down and gets like 3 yards, and then it's 3rd and 8. And I don't remember if they converted that or not, but that's Derek Carr to me. He's a good quarterback, but if you want to talk about the next level expectations that the Raiders are getting close to having, being able to beat the Bucs and consistently beat the Chiefs, because I know they did it once, but you just need more from Derek Carr. You really do, especially if this defense is not going to be good, which I don't see changing anytime soon. Speaking of bad defense, the Jags-Chargers game is up next. So the Jags are just straight up going through the motions right now. They really are. They can move the ball on offense. Gardner Minshew, I do respect that he is playing his ass off. He wants more than anything to prove to either the Jags or someone else that he needs to be a starter in this league. And I do think he's one of the 32 best quarterbacks in the NFL. But I think he's going to be kind of like Teddy Bridgewater, is this sort of Band-Aid option. Keep your team afloat type of deal. But yeah, Jags are they're kind of going through the motions. I wouldn't be surprised if they end up with Trevor Lawrence, depending on what happens with the Jets. But let's talk about Justin Herbert. So I watched the Lions and Chargers games back to back, and maybe that skewed this opinion, but it really felt like, I watched the Lions game first. It really felt like they just took Stafford and dropped him on the Chargers. That's really what that felt like. And Chargers fans won't like that. I mean, Chargers fans want me to say that Herbert has Patrick Mahomes upside, that he can be Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson. Maybe he can. That is a massive jump forward. So obviously I've been impressed by Herbert, and we'll get to the good stuff. I think that you want to talk about rhythm discrepancies, play-to-play consistency, and frankly, some of the accuracy stuff the last week. Well, I mean, especially in this game, there were some throws where it's like, ooh, he could have hit that. One game, don't want to overreact. And, Stafford's been relatively really accurate throughout his career. Just missing a little bit of that next step up, that play-to-play consistency that we talked about. But Stafford has always been a guy that elevates the players around him, capable of having explosive offense, capable of having MVP seasons, just never really got the help. And honestly, with the Chargers, he's getting some good help. And they have the potential to, over the course of his career, surround him with really good defense, because you got Bosa. In theory, you should get Derwin James in there. So if you put Stafford on the Chargers, like your perception of Stafford is going to change, because they're going to be a much more winning football team, I think. So I don't want this to be an insult to Herbert. And my pre-draft high-end comp was Jared Goff, and he's shattered that. I mean, he's clearly got Goff as an elite arm, but Herbert has like double elite arm. He has Matthew Stafford arm. He has Mahomes arm. He has, and maybe that is elite, and Goff just has a very good arm. But I really think Herbert is Matthew Stafford. He's a little bit faster. You can do some more running with him. He'll have some bigger runs. Stafford can run though. Don't get that don't forget that. So I really feel pretty good about that. Like, there's a ton of similarities. He leaves some meat on the bones as far as the rhythm of the offense, and he's still a rookie. He could totally change that. He's already changed my perception of him as this sort of catapult athlete of a quarterback in a Jared Goff sense, a way where he's going to have to live vicariously through the quarterback or through the coach. That's not him. He right now has not been a rhythm player. He's been Wentz, Stafford, as far as making these spectacular plays that are often good enough that you just don't really worry about the easy stuff. So that's where I'm at with Herbert. Like, I think he's blown me away. I would say he's a top 15 quarterback. I don't know. Maybe I need to redo my rankings, but I feel pretty, based on what I've seen, I feel pretty safe saying that he can be Matthew Stafford and be a top 10 quarterback who might have his imperfections as a quarterback in the same way that Stafford and Wentz have. Even like Deshaun Watson has some of these imperfections. I think Herbert can be even like Lamar Jackson. Like, those guys are kind of, they've floated around that 5 to 10 range. I think Herbert can be in that group. I'm still taking Joe Burrow over him because the attention to detail is elite. I think Burrow does everything at a higher level, except for like being able to make these wow vertical throws. Herbert has had much more time to throw, though, than Burrow. And Burrow has come alive as far as the vertical game the last couple of weeks. I'm still taking Burrow. If Chargers fans want that take, I'm still going to do it. My opinion. Like, you can have your opinion. You can take Herbert instead. That's perfectly fine. I mean, it's been incredible. But, yeah, I'm still going to take Burrow. And then I want to end this game with a short Joe Reed shout-out. Another draft guy of mine was Joe Reed, who I had him 4th round grade on him and was just impressed by everything he did. He reminded me a lot of Deebo Samuel, and they get him involved on a total Deebo Samuel play. It was a jet sweep, touchdown, a big boy run. He broke a couple tackles, found his way into the end zone. I would love to see them get more creative with him in the manufactured touches side of the game here. All right, last game here, and then we're going to get into the mailbag. So Kansas City, Denver. Really not a lot to say here. I don't think Denver is as bad as they played in this game, but my God, was that a terrible performance by the Denver Broncos. For the most part, nobody showed up, but Drew Lock really didn't show up. And this comes back to some of the stuff we said about Daniel Jones, but it's at a much more extreme scale with Drew Lock, because at least Daniel Jones can consistently move the ball, and then he just has some dumb turnovers. Drew Lock doesn't consistently move the ball and has dumb turnovers. And he's much less accurate. I understand why you would get excited about Drew Lock. He makes the occasional play. He'll make like maybe 1 or 2 plays a game where you're like, yes, that's it. Do that every time. And then he just doesn't do that often enough. And then the easy stuff looks real bad and difficult for him. I think it's very revealing that he has been, outside of week 1, I know he hasn't played a lot, but you can tell just by watching the game, he is incapable of utilizing Jerry Jeudy, which to me is a major problem. If you can't utilize Jerry Jeudy, you got some issues, because Jerry Jeudy is the ultimate system rhythm player. If you want a dependable guy that is always going to get open and be your first read and be that reliable option within the rhythm of the offense, Jerry Jeudy is perfect. He is one of the best route runners in the NFL already. It's just not showing itself in the box sheet because Drew Lock, is just not good enough throwing over the middle of the field. He is very, he's got kind of like headlight vision. He's just kind of looking on the outsides. And he just doesn't play in structure. He's inaccurate. He makes bad mistakes. There's a world where Drew Lock works out. There really is, but how many worlds is that? 1 out of 40? And if you're Denver, how long do you want to sit around and wait on that? I would draft a quarterback. It looks like Denver's going to be picking very high this year. I would draft, I'm not even a big Justin Fields guy, but that's coming into the year. Fields looked really good in the first game, so it looks like Fields is probably going to be a top 2 or 3 pick. We'll see as the college season plays on if I agree with that or not. I've never been solidified on my Justin Fields takes. I said I didn't like him coming into his final year of college, but there's plenty. I didn't like Joe Burrow coming into his final year of college. But let's say Fields becomes a top 3 candidate, or Trey Lance impresses. Again, another guy I'm not crazy on. But all those guys seem like better options to me than Drew Lock right now. This season totally hinged on him. Now they've had so many injuries that it's hard to say, but I need to see something from Drew Lock before I feel like he's even a starter going into next year. I'm not sure if they would have kept Blake Bortles around. I'm not sure that would have been worse than what we're seeing from Drew Lock, which is yucky. As for the Chiefs, I mean, they really didn't even have to try. Like, this was kind of like we said about Washington when they played Dallas. Like, Denver was just so bad on all three sides of the ball, offense, defense, and special teams. So Kansas City, I mean, Patrick Mahomes had 26 dropbacks in this game. He completed 15 completions on 23 attempts, dropped back to throw 26 times. They didn't have to play. Like, we know the Chiefs they can beat you in so many ways. It was an impressive win by the best team in football. I mean, the best team in football is going to, dribble you through the net when you show up like the Broncos did, or don't show up, rather. Okay, so there are the reactions. We're at about a minute and a half, an hour and a half here, which gives us some time for the mailbag. All right, plenty of questions here. Thanks again to all of my patrons. Wow, we got a lot of questions. So I might go a little bit faster because I do promise to get through every one of your questions if you are a Patreon supporter. Again, I do ask that you start your questions with mailbag question, just so it's clear for me in my inbox here. But this is from Logan. What do you think of starting Tua against the Rams, especially the Dolphins are on a bye right now, giving Tua another week to prepare, and the Rams will be on a short week? Do you think they should have kept Fitzpatrick in since he's playing so good, even though they struggled against the Jets? Even though he struggled against the Jets. No, I talked about this last week, so I'll kind of defer you to that a little bit, but I think it's right because, for one, like, this season is not lost. 2 of the 4 teams in your division suck, and the Bills are reeling. So I think that just this season, like, you get some real upside if Tua is good. And then if he is good, this offseason, if you can be that aggressive team with the quarterback on a rookie deal. Because if you don't know, and then, look at the Bears. Like, they went all in. They traded for Khalil Mack. They thought they had something in Trubisky, which the tape would have argued with that, but you wouldn't be replicating that mistake. So if Tua happens to suck, or if he really is that fragile and can't hold up, you're not going to jeopardize your future this offseason if you aren't sure. But if he comes out and balls out, okay, let's go trade for whoever. Let's trade up in the draft. Let's, be aggressive because we want to win with the quarterback on the rookie contract. That's also important. So finding out what you have is more important now than ever, in large part because of the rookie contract scale. From Connor Lee, as a Packer fan, would you rather Trevor Lawrence drafted by the Jets or to a team in your own division? Well, I say I'm a Packers fan, but I'm a football fan first. And I would much rather see Trevor Lawrence, who I really like. I wish he would cut his hair on it. Like, I get it's kind of like a marketing thing, but I don't really like the hair, especially on a quarterback. Like, I wouldn't like a quarterback with dreads. I just... Something to me about, like, quarterback being kind of a mature-looking leader of an organization. I'm fine if you're a receiver, kind of having some swag and kind of, flaunting the hair. But as a quarterback, I kind of want you to be more of a professional-looking guy. So I would cut the hair, but I like Trevor Lawrence a lot. I would rather he end up on the Vikings that I think are going to give him more success than he go to the Jets where he's just going to fail. All right, again from Connor Lee, top 5 MVP candidates. Is Ryan Tannehill a legit top 5 candidate? I would not put Tannehill there because I think there's 4 quarterbacks above him. I think Russ, Rodgers, I think Kyler is above him, and I think Tom Brady is above him. And then Tannehill might be 5th, but honestly, with that many quarterbacks ahead of him, I would give my vote to Aaron Donald ahead of him. And I think Josh Allen, if he can pick things back up, will be ahead of him as well. All right, from Vic. Which 49ers do I go? RB do I go? Hasty or McKinnon? Well, short answer, whoever's playing that week. I don't think Hasty... as much as I like Hasty, there's so many bodies there, and they seem to be in and out of the lineup every week. It's kind of a fantasy football mess. I do like Hasty, but I just don't think that team is ever committed to one running back right now. All right, from Jacob Anthony. What relatively young players at each position has shown promise to be the next top player at his position? By the way, it's pronounced Anthony. Okay, I got you. I'll get you next time. So a chance to be the top player at his position. So we're talking utmost upside. So quarterback, and it's not necessarily rookies, right? Relatively young players. So who could supersede at each position to be number one? Quarterback, I am going to go Kyler. I think if you just want to talk about upside, he has the potential to be a fully well-rounded dual threat elite quarterback in the same way that Mahomes and Russ are. Running back, who cares? Receiver, to take the crown, I'm going to go Chris Godwin. I think could take the crown if he could stay healthy and get on the same page with Tom Brady. We've seen such little amounts of that. Terry McLaurin too. I mean, I don't know if he has all the physical traits. DK Metcalf as well. I mean, there's some really exciting receivers in the game right now. Okay, tight end. I don't see anyone surpassing Kittle anytime soon. And then O-line, I think that Laramie Tunsil is coming for that crown. He has been outstanding. At guard, just to keep it moving, how about Wyatt Teller? Why not? He's been awesome when he's been healthy. Center, top centers. Let's go with Ragnow in Detroit. Edge, I would say Myles Garrett, TJ Watt to surpass Khalil Mack at some point. Interior, I mean, you're going to have to look 4 years down the road before Donald shows any regression, but Jeffrey Simmons could be a flyer there. The obvious heir apparent would be Chris Jones in Kansas City. Linebacker, Devin White looks unreal the last couple weeks. I'm going to go with him. Corner, how about Jair Alexander? We kind of talked about him. Safety, I would love to see Derwin James come back healthy and take that crown. I don't even know who has the crown at safety right now, honestly. I mean, there's a lot of really good safeties. Minka Fitzpatrick, Budda Baker's like kind of making a case there. Safety is kind of difficult because they all do such different stuff. But I like that question. It's a fun one. All right, from JOR. Do organizations still prioritize getting a deep, talented cornerback room like the Patriots have done, Lions, etc.? Will this start a trend, or will pass rushers and linebackers still take precedent over corners in the draft? Well, linebackers have always been secondary importance, third level importance. Linebackers have never been a high level priority for most teams. Some teams prioritize it more than others. I think we're seeing a push back towards pass rushers. I don't think pass rush is quite as deep as it was a couple years ago. And offensive line is actually getting deeper in the league. If you look like 3 years ago, there was like 10 good offensive lines in the whole league, and everyone seemed to have a good pass rush. It's balancing out a little more, and I think when that happens, the great pass rushes show up a little more. And, I mean, if you can get after the quarterback, I still I mean, I agree that coverage is really important. There's the whole coverage versus pass rush debate. I still think for the most part, pass rush is going to supersede coverage. I think if you have an elite secondary, like the Patriots did, that's a little different because you're covering up everybody. But it's so much easier to get a Myles Garrett or a Khalil Mack or two good, high-end number twos and impact the game through the pass rush. It's so much easier to do that than it is to have 5 cohesive, well-coached, well-schemed players in the secondary. There's plenty of ways to win in football. So I think there's so many factors there. Who's your coach? How confident are you in your ability to scout those positions? There's so many moving pieces there. I think they're both definitely more important than linebackers to answer that part of your question. What's from Tyler? What are your thoughts on Ndamukong Suh's Hall of Fame chances? 0. I don't think he's a Hall of Fame player. He's never been an elite pass rusher. He's frankly never been a top. I mean, there was maybe a couple years in Detroit where he was a top 3 player at his position, but he spent most of his career as a borderline top 10 player at his position. From Ash, did the Patriots make a mistake not drafting someone like Jake Fromm, especially considering he was still available 3rd, 4th, 5th round? Yeah, I mean, I liked Jake Fromm. I would like to see what Jake Fromm... I wouldn't. I don't think Jake Fromm would be good on the Patriots right now. It's very possible that they just didn't like the options and were like, well, we don't really have great help here. Let's just see if Cam Newton can do some stuff in the run game. I don't know if I would have perceived Jarrett Stidham that much different than Jake Fromm. Honestly, I was really high on Jake Fromm early in the draft process, but I ended up pushing him into the 2nd, 3rd round, which is right where I had Stidham. So I understand the thinking there. Like, we kind of got our prospect in Stidham. Let's get Cam Newton, who's kind of this higher floor veteran. Now, if you want to talk about should they have drafted Jordan Love, that's different. Again, it's different because they have such a crappy situation for any quarterback. I'm hard on Cam, but it really is setting up their quarterback to fail right now because they have no good playmakers. They are by far the worst receiving unit in the league right now, even more than like the Jets, I think. All right, from Lions. What's up with the Lions play calling? It seems so much more passive than last year. I don't think so. I think they're taking their shots. I think as much as I love Stafford, I just think he's kind of a hard quarterback to play call for because he does want those big plays. Also, what'd you think about Baker on Sunday? I know he's your boy. Alex. He looked good. He's been terrible every other game this year, so let's see what he does against not the Bengals defense. I talked about Baker, though. You can go back to that game recap. All right, Spencer. OBJ is officially done for the year. What do you think about a trade between the Browns and Eagles for Alshon Jeffrey in exchange for a pick? I'm good. I'll just take my chances with Peoples-Jones, Jarvis Landry, Higgins. Jeffrey, he can't stay healthy. He doesn't separate. I don't think that's the guy you go for. I mean, maybe you go for like Kenny Stills, who can replace kind of that deep threat from the Texans, but Jeffrey wouldn't be the guy I target. From Andrew Bridges, what's happening? Marcus, got a mailbag question for you. The LaFleur Packers have not been able to win on the road in warm weather. Is this a coincidence or maybe too small of a sample size? How would you explain it? Yeah, I wouldn't point to the warm weather thing there. I mean, they've played some really good pass rushes on the road, and they've fallen behind. And when you can get to Aaron Rodgers, which is easier said than done, because their blocking schemes are so good, but in the case of the Chargers, the Niners, and the Bucks, which are the 3 blowout losses they've had, they dominated the line of scrimmage, and then you could have the worst secondary in the league. If you double Devontae Adams, there's nowhere for Rodgers to go with the football. So I think teams with good pass rushes have found a formula. They can rush 4, And, well, the Bucs blitzed, but I think just good, well-coached defenses like the Chargers, the Niners, and the Bucs, like they're like, well, your offense, even though you have Aaron Rodgers, it's still pretty one-dimensional. You stop the run, you stop Devontae Adams. It's not that hard. I don't think it's a road thing. I mean, last year, sure, that the pass rush, I talk about it all the time, like when you're on the road, but even the Chargers, like they don't have a home field advantage. So I will say that in the case of the Niners, those games being at home for the Niners was big because you get the crowd noise going, you force Aaron Rodgers to go to a silent count, and the pass rush is you can key off of the right guard tapping the center's thigh, and when the ball's going to get snapped, which helps your pass rush a ton. That's the only thing about being on the road that I would say. We'll get to see Tua this week, but do you think the Dolphins are regretting taking him over Herbert? Herbert's arm seems miles above Tua's. I don't know if they regret it. I do think it's an interesting conversation. I mean, we'll see what Tua looks like. I think they're just going to be very different players. I think Tua, my comp for him is Jimmy Garoppolo, as this sort of rhythm guy that can use the middle of the field really well, maybe a little bit more movement in the pocket. Herbert's had the big arm, big plays stuff. I don't know. I don't think they're ready to regret it yet. They spent a lot of time evaluating these guys. I'm sure they have a lot of confidence in Tua. If Tua's bad, they'll regret it, but we'll see where that goes. From Justin Oaks. Sorry if this question is long. I couldn't figure out a way to word it. When is the proper time for an organization to decide their young QB isn't the answer, like when the Bears should have decided to give up on Trubisky? Then the other side, how do you decide on if a QB is worth the big paycheck or not if they're a middling quarterback like Dak Prescott? You don't know if you can win with him, but you also don't want to just let him walk. Finally, do you know if it's too early for a QB? How do you know if it's too early for a QB who is clearly someone you can win with? Well, I don't really understand that last part there, so I'm going to leave that part out. But I would say, honestly, with how good young quarterbacks look these days, I would give a guy 16 games. And if you don't see the sort of development that you need to see, and also like 16 games with giving them help. Like in Trubisky's case, they went and signed Allen Robinson. They had a decent offensive line. They gave him an offensive head coach. In the Giants' case, they have some decent weapons there. They drafted offensive linemen. They're putting pieces around them. In the Jets' case with like Sam Darnold, I don't know how you can take away any sort of evaluation of what you're getting from Sam Darnold. Yes, you're concerned that he's not showing the development, but if you think you've done a good job to surround him with help, enough help to at least show development, I would say 16 games is about that timeline, which, it's no fluke that we're at about 16 starts for Daniel Jones, where I'm saying there hasn't been the development. I'd move on. So that's my answer on that. And then the other one is not so easy. I mean, as hard as I've been on Dak, there's been times when I've said they should let him go. There's been times when I've said they should pay him. That's just so hard. That is not the type of decision that I envy. I think Jerry Jones has kind of played this right. He's made offers to Dak Prescott, but he hasn't totally caved in. I don't think he wanted to pay him $40 million, and maybe he eventually did offer 4 years, $40 a year. Dak wanted $5. In the case of like Kirk Cousins on the Vikings, when they're trying to win, that's probably the biggest thing for me is if you know that your roster is special or that you have a win now window, you probably just pay the quarterback. Like in Dallas's case, in Minnesota's case, they knew like we probably aren't best for the long-term future with Kirk Cousins, probably not best for the long-term future with Dak Prescott. But if we let him go now, we are wasting everything else that we've built here. So that's probably my answer there. Whereas, like, take the case of the Washington team. They didn't have that for Kirk. Definitely not when they let him go. They did years before when he really looked good. But if you're Washington, or take the Raiders with Derek Carr as a great example right now. And Derek Carr, you only have to pay like $25 million right now. But if he becomes $40 million, that's where I'm like, you know what? I'll take 2 steps back so that we can take 8 steps forward with a potentially better quarterback. And the beauty is, when you know that you're going to do that, you can draft a Jordan Love. You can draft a Patrick Mahomes, a guy that isn't a top 10 pick, you know? Like the Chiefs had to trade up to get Mahomes. The Packers took Love 24. We'll see if Love turns out to be good or not. But the whole draft and develop thing, I think that's something you really consider when you have a quarterback like that. All right, we are getting to the top of these questions here, getting towards the 2-hour mark. I see a lot on social media, it was from Hunt, that Herbert is better than Burrow. I don't agree with it, but I'm wondering what your thoughts. I talked about that earlier, so I'm going to skip over that. Sorry, Hunt. Jake Goodian. I'm sure you'll touch on this in Studs and Duds, but what are your thoughts on how Mahomes has played this season? Couple bad weather games, didn't look too sharp in the second half as the Raiders. Is dropping more into coverage a consistent way to beat him, or something offenses can work around going forward? Yeah, I think that where do I start here? Mahomes has been outstanding. He's been, I would say Russ has been the best, and then I would say Rodgers has been the second best, and Mahomes has been third best, but I think they're all pretty close. Mahomes is still spectacular. He's potentially going to go down as the greatest quarterback to ever play, given that he's got all this help. He's already got 1 ring. I don't see Andy Reid and all those guys going anywhere anytime soon. But if you want to just talk about where he's at right now in his career, he is looking much more like not rookie year, but second year Patrick Mahomes, which was an MVP winner. That a lot of that was narrative, and I mean his stats were unbelievable. But I was actually, to a degree, critical of Mahomes. I mean, I had him as like QB2 or QB3. I think I had Rodgers, Russ, and Mahomes. But I was relatively critical on things that I think are showing up this year that weren't necessarily there last year, and that's just some of the old Texas Tech stuff, where kind of the dumb mistakes, like almost like he gets too bored and presses too hard, or like, yeah, I think that is kind of the way you can capitalize on any flaws that he has. I do think that forcing him to process your defense, particularly zone coverage, forcing him to process your defense, be patient, take what's there. I don't know if he wants to do that for 60 minutes. I think he wants to make the big plays. He wants to be Superman. And more often than not, it's going to work. But I do think that if you can get after the quarterback, which ironically the Raiders were the team that was able to do that, you rush 4, you consistently drop, wow, math is off. It's been a long show. You drop 7 into coverage. You mix up your coverages. You show disguise. But you basically take the approach of he's going to get his. He's going to put up 28, 35 points. But we can hopefully get 2 or 3 plays a game where he does make the wrong read. Because I don't think he's where Aaron Rodgers is, or Tom Brady, or even, I mean, Russell Wilson will do it occasionally. Russell Wilson will occasionally have a game like this where he'll make some mistakes and throw 2 or 3 picks. But Mahomes isn't like some of these older quarterbacks in that he's going to give you some turnover-worthy opportunities from doing too much or making a bad read. just a little younger. He's got a little more of an aggressive mindset. I don't know if I would necessarily call it a flaw, but that's just kind of where he's at. So if you can capitalize on the 2 times that he puts the ball in harm's way, get a couple turnovers, accept the fact that you're not going to shut this guy out, don't blitz him, don't try to keep the Chiefs under 20 points. It's not going to work. He's really good against the blitz, by the way. But yeah, drop back, get after it with your front 4. That's the key factor. I mean, if you aren't getting a pass rush, he's going to pick you apart and not make those mistakes. But that's kind of what the Raiders did. They're like, we trust our offense to put up 40 points. We got a good game plan there, and we're going to hopefully capitalize on some mistakes, and they did it. They did it. That's the way you beat the Chiefs, I think. Now, it's not easy, but if you're looking for a way to beat the Chiefs, who have Patrick Mahomes and are the best team in football, I think that's kind of the right approach for sure. All right, from Luma Cuba. Can you describe the difference between nickel, dime, quarter, dollar defenses? Yeah. It's referring to the number of defensive backs. Now, I don't know why they go with nickel, dime, and quarter, to be honest. Probably some reason from an older day, but those terms have stuck. But essentially, nickel is any package with 6 defensive backs. And then dime is going to be sorry, I got that wrong. Nickel is 5 defensive backs. Yep. Sorry. It's been a long show. The math, I guess after, an hour and 45 minutes, the math just stops working here. Nickel is 5 defensive backs. Dime and dollar are 6 defensive backs, and quarter is 7 defensive backs. Dollar and dime, I want to say dime means you have 4 pass rushers and 1 linebacker. Dollar is 3 pass rushers and 2 linebackers, but very similar. And then quarter is 7 defensive backs. So nickel is the new base. 5 defensive backs, 4 pass rushers, and 2 linebackers is what about 70% of snaps in the NFL are going to be. Whether it's your outside linebacker edges or hand in the dirt edges. It's the difference between a 3-4 team and a 4-3 team. It's a lot less of a difference than people like to think, because most of these teams are running nickel packages 70% of the time. The only difference is, some teams will have their linebackers with their hands off the ground, or they'll have their edge players as linebackers with their hand off the ground. Sometimes they'll put their hand in the dirt. All right, from Connor Lee, coming in with all the questions this week, Connor. Can you do a mid-season review after week 8 where you hand out awards, MVP, frontrunners, and stuff? Yeah, if I have time next week, I could see doing that. Also, it seems like my Cowboys may be starting to tank after trading Griffin. What do you think? Do you think they're more or less likely to pay Dak after how bad they've been with Dalton? Or will we draft a new QB and just rebuild? I think the only scenario where they draft a new quarterback is if they actually get the number 1 pick and draft Trevor Lawrence, because that's a no-brainer. I mean, whatever you think about Dak, I think the idea of getting Trevor Lawrence on that team on a rookie contract, I think that's a no-brainer. Now, I as a critic of Dak, would probably pay Dak ahead of rolling the dice on Lance and Fields. Depending on, Fields, again, I don't think I'm going to end up liking Lance, because I don't think he was very good in his 1 game this year. We'll see where that all plays out, but I don't think at this point in time that I would go that far, because I do still think Dak's a good quarterback. Problem is you got to find a way to get rid of Zeke's contract. I don't think trading Griffin necessarily means a tank. I think they're still going to try to win for the next couple weeks. But especially, they're going to be trying. I don't expect them to just roll over against the Eagles, especially if Andy Dalton's playing. All right, last question here will be just under 2 hours. From Davis Jed. Just a fantasy football question. Nice and easy. I like it. Was wondering who you would recommend starting at QB, Tannehill or Burrow. They are playing each other. Great job, Davis. I do need you guys, when you ask fantasy questions, include the matchups, because I often struggle to remember those when I'm on the live. I would play... I don't think you can go wrong. I'd probably play Tannehill. The Bengals defense is so bad. And I got Tannehill in a couple leagues. He's a nice fantasy quarterback. I think Tannehill's give you a higher floor. Yeah, I'd go Tannehill. But can't go wrong with either. All right, there is your Fully Inflated Football Podcast, the Week 7 recap. Thank you all for listening and watching. Rate, review if you're just listening to the audio version. Hit that like button if you're on YouTube. We'll see you guys on Patreon tomorrow for my weekly picks, on Friday for Studs and Duds, and then I'm also busting my butt trying to get the draft class done for Madden on Xbox by Saturday, but also launching my NCAA series on YouTube. So lots of great stuff ahead this week. Awesome show. Thanks for the mailbag questions. Hope you guys enjoy your time until we are back. But cheers as always. We'll see you for the next one. Peace.